why it would be interesting or fascinating for him or her to study psychology?
I have my view of psychology, which is not the orthodox view. I don't think it's a science. I think it's a form of literature, in effect. It's descriptive. There are attempts to scientify psychology, but this is precisely the attraction of psychology. It's simultaneously an extremely creative field, because it's literature, and at the same time it captures the myriad manifestations of what it is to be human. And yes, you can make a difference. You can make a difference if you treat people and help them. You do see results. Actually, in the majority of cases, you see results, unless you're seriously bad at what you're doing. The majority of cases, you see results. And you're able to save lives and at least mend lives, if not save them. There are failures everywhere. Failures in medicine, there are failures. Of course, psychology as well. But I'm also a medical doctor. And when you compare the two fields, in psychology, I feel that I have a much greater impact, if you wish, systemic impact, on all areas of life of the person. It's a renaissance, it's a resurrection, it's a revival. I'm almost using religious terms. It's a bit of a religious experience, because you are very often reviving someone.
His personality.
Yes, parts of people die. Reality is so harsh that all of us are walking around with dead parts. Here, whatever. And the good therapist or the good psychologist revives these parts, brings them back to life. It is life-making. It's a life-making thing. I've been a physicist. I have a PhD in physics. I've been a medical doctor, although not practicing, but I've been an MD. I've been in many fields. I've been an economist. In none of these fields did I feel that I'm making a difference. Of course I made a difference, but an individual difference, a one-to-one difference, a resonant difference. I am in psychology for 26 years because it's highly complex. Nothing is more complex than the human mind, not even the universe. It's highly complex. It always surprises me. It never ceases to surprise me. And you can really help. If I go to Ukraine, maybe I will save 100 lives. How many people can say this?
Yeah.
And in which discipline can you say this?
And even if it's not a science, and we can say that psychology tries to use reason, to use some methods, and to it's not shamanism. It's not.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's not fantastic. It's not fantastic. It's reality grounded, reality based. A lot of it is evidence based. It doesn't make it a science, but it's evidence based. So it's a good practice. It's a set of good practices, which one generation of psychologists passes to the next. I'm a professor, so I'm teaching my students, and they will pass it on.
And there are different schools somehow.
There is a lot of disagreement about the whys of psychology, why things happen. But there is little disagreement actually about what is happening. There's just a lot of disagreement about why things happen. But when you look at these disagreements much more closely, you discover that it's not a disagreement about reality, it's a disagreement about language. Mm-hmm. Very often different schools actually are different ways of saying the same thing, just using different language. Mm-hmm. So if you are very stoic about the validity of language, if you say, what do I care which word I use as long as I touch the essence? If you realize that ego and Eden in Freud's model are just metaphors, they're not reality. It's no one captured an ego and put it in a refrigerator, It's a metaphor. So if you realize that this is a metaphor, then the internal family system, which is a much more advanced school, is also a metaphor. It's all metaphors. It's all literature. That's what I'm trying to say. The greatest psychology to have ever lived was Dostoevsky.
So in order to become a good psychologist, you have to read a lot of books of literature.
Of course, I in my at least classes, Dostoevsky is obligatory reading, Musil is obligatory reading, and so on. By the way, I'm not the only one. Look at someone like Jordan Peterson. He also says the same. Dostoevsky is a great psychologist, and so on. There's an agreement among. The thing is that a lot of people who go into psychology.
So it's not only about technical issues.
Exactly.
It's about
I was
understanding.
I was about to say.
Yeah.
A lot of people who go into psychology, they are technicians. They think the human mind is like a car, and they're being taught how to be mechanics in a garage. That's of course not true. It's not true. It's about resonating with the other person. It's about the common experience of humanity. It's about providing insight. Insight is simply seeing yourself and your life from a totally different point of view. Amazing, from up, from down. So you need to be creative. You need to be creative. It's absolutely, you need every therapy session and every paper in psychology is a work of art, is literature.
Yeah.
And you need to have a lot of humility in front of the human phenomenon. If you're arrogant, you're not a good psychologist.
Yeah.
You're not a good psychologist. Every therapy session is an experience at being humbled, if not humiliated.
Yeah. I remember a book of Viktor Frankl about the meaning of life.
Yes, search for meaning.
Yeah. And that book is a living example that even in a worst place imaginable, like during Holocaust, Auschwitz, somehow you can find a basis for a meaning.
Yeah. And that's because people confuse meaning and purpose. Purpose is something else. Goal orientation, that's not meaning. There are many people who are very accomplished and their lives are meaningless.
Yeah.
Meaning is not about purpose. Your being is meaning. Your very existence is meaning. You see what happened in Auschwitz? You could not be goal oriented. Auschwitz is a laboratory where you could not have any goal because a crazy SS guard could kill you the next minute.
Yeah.
It was meaningless to plan in Auschwitz. There were no planning in Auschwitz. You therefore, Auschwitz forced you to focus on the essence, on what matters. And what matters was your being and your existence. I had a conversation with a colleague yesterday, and I told her, the world would not have been the same had you not been born. The world would not have been the same had you not acted the way you did, and the world would not be the same if you were to kill yourself, for example. In other words, you are co-author. You are co-author of the world. And when I say the world, I don't mean Romania, I mean the universe. Because Romania happens to be in the universe. So the whole universe will not be the same if I were to kill myself this very second. I will have forced the universe to be different.
Yeah.
Every action of mine forces the whole universe to be different. So we are co-authors of the world. What other meaning are you looking for?
Yeah.
Your very existence is it. That's the meaning,
Yeah, it's a beautiful metaphor, this one. All of us are co-authors of the universe.
But that's a physical fact.
Yeah.
If you were to die this very minute, you must agree with me that the world will not be the same.
Yeah.
So if the world is not the same, you have an impact on the world.
Yeah.
You create the world, you co-author. By the way, this is also in physics. In physics, when we try to interpret quantum mechanics, there is a school of thought that says, it's called many worlds interpretation. School of thought that says that every time someone makes a decision, the universe splits.
Yeah, and there
in
is
one part.
Infinity of universes.
Yes, infinity. In one part there is the decision, in another there isn't. And it may come as a surprise to you, you're not a physicist, but that's the dominant view of physics now, actually.
Yeah, but it's also a matter of philosophy here. For philosophers, it's also a very interesting issue.
Yes, but we can agree, if we want to avoid mysticism, we can agree on a simple fact. The world with me is not the same like the world without me.
Yeah.
I mean, we can't argue with this.
Yeah.
The world with this chair is not the same as the world without this chair.
Yeah.
In this sense, I am a co-author of the world.
Yeah.
And if I'm agentic, in other words, if I act, every action of mine makes me a higher level co-author. But even if I only exist, that's enough, just existing, I'm co-author. What bigger source of meaning can there be? I mean, this is meaning. And this is what Frankl, in my view, had learned in Auschwitz. Because in Auschwitz you couldn't have a career plan, you couldn't invest in your education, all the nonsense was stripped off. and he came face to face with the essence.
Yeah.
He survived, I think, if my memory doesn't fail me, a few years in Auschwitz.
Yeah.
It's shocking, totally shocking.
So we are, let's say, at the end of this beautiful interview. If you want to add something, I don't know, about psychology, about Ukraine, about the meaning of life, anything you want to add?
Ukraine is a parable. It's not only a war. It's a parable of what happens when narrow interpretations of history and humanity prevail. Such narrow interpretations go hand in hand with the suspension of liberties and rights. Regrettably, all over the world, there is an extremely clear movement towards the suspension, towards these narrow interpretations. And I think the reason people adhere to authoritarian regimes and so on and so forth is because reality had become unbearable. Reality is no longer tolerable, it's harsh. You see, I say in some of my interviews, possibly the worst period in human history. And what do I mean by that? In the 14th century, half the population, anywhere between 1/3 and half the population of Europe, died in the Black Plague, in the Black Death. That was bad. We would agree it's bad. It's much worse than today in terms of mortality. But you know, if you were alive in Europe in the 14th century and your whole family died of the plague, you still could go to your church. You still could go to the lord of the manor, the feudal lord. You still believed in God. In other words, you were still embedded in institutions, in the social fabric. You had where to go.
You had a place in that world.
You had a world.
You had a world.
We don't have a world anymore. Family is dead. Church is dead. God is dead. Nietzsche killed him. Everything, we're atomized. We're all existentially alone. So even if the disasters we are facing are on a much lower scale than the 14th century, our capacity to cope with these disasters is infinitely lower. Which leads back to the theme of this interview, trauma. Trauma is a new phenomenon. First time trauma had been described was about 100 years ago. Why? Because people were stupid? Depression was described in the 17th century. Psychosis was described in the 18th century. Psychopathy was described in the 19th century. Sadism in the 19th century. Only trauma is a newcomer. Why? Were people so stupid they didn't notice trauma before? No, it's a new phenomenon. It's a new phenomenon. And it's a new phenomenon because we're all alone. We have nowhere and no one to go to. We are so atomized, so broken.
It's a paradox because we are in the most connected period of history. We are connected with each other by internet, by information.
It's another confusion between connection and meaning. Again, like purpose and meaning. Connection doesn't create meaning. There's a lot of connection between Russian soldiers and the women they rape. That wouldn't render the interaction meaningful. Connection is not meaning. And that's a confusion in social media.
Yeah.
I think that's why you have friends in social media. It's nonsense. This is an abuse of the language. Social media and similar technology, they're abusing language.
Yeah.
The same way, I'm sorry to say, that the Nazis abused language in the concentration camps, where the gas chambers were called baths. When you call total strangers friends, you are corrupting the language. And the language is the only thing that stands between us and a total degeneration into barbarity.
Yeah.
When we are destroying language, we are destroying meaning. And destroying meaning, we're destroying our own survival.
That's why we need Wittgenstein.
We need many things.
Yeah.
We need many things. Wittgenstein said that private languages cannot exist, only languages which are communicable. I think it's one of these extremely rare occasions that this genius was wrong. I think we are in the process of developing private languages. Everything is breaking down and we are forced to develop private languages to communicate with ourselves. We're becoming self-sufficient, even as far as language is concerned. We are self-referential. We're referring to ourselves. All this is connected to this interview. Don't think we're straying far. This trauma is about this. What is trauma? Is inability to process information. You simply can't process the information. Either there's too much information, or the information is too destructive, and so your mind shuts off. And trauma involves dissociation. Dissociation means that you cut off the information and you forget about it. You bury it somewhere. This is all about language. This is all about atomization, because when you're faced with a trauma, never mind if you're surrounded by extended family of 250 members, you're all alone. When you're faced with a trauma, you're all alone. The extreme existential loneliness in the face of a dropping bomb, or a dead person, or your pet, if your kid, your pet, was killed, or you're being raped. You're all alone that minute, even if you're surrounded by 100 other people. Loneliness is the core of trauma and the breakdown of language.
Yeah.
And so the mind shuts.
Yeah.
Mind shuts and everything is buried. And Freud was the one who said that when these memories are buried, they bury with them negative energy. It's a process called abreaction. They bury negative energy. And this negative energy is like poison, continues to work in the unconscious and destroys conscious processes like cognition, emotion, and so on.
Yeah.
It's all interconnected. Everything we discuss is interconnected.
Yeah.
So my compliments on your questions, because they're very astute.
Yeah, and there is all that you said make me think that all of these issues are strong related also with philosophy.
Strong?
It's strong related with philosophy and with a lot of philosophical problems about our place in this world.
I like your questions because they touch on. I think the decline of philosophy is an extremely strong indicator of our condition, which is not a good condition. Philosophy used to be the mother of sciences, and now it is the I don't know what, daughter or something. Philosophy is mocked, ignored. Only those who can't make it in technology or in science go to philosophy. You know, and we don't allow philosophy anymore to define for us the agenda of eudaimonia, a good life, a proper life, and the agenda of the sciences. Mm-hmm. Until the 1930s or 1940s, philosophers told scientists what to do. Karl Popper told scientists what to do. Bertrand Russell told scientists what to do. Philosophy told science what to do. When the philosophical compass was lost because of the hubris and grandiosity of the sciences and so on, we literally lost our compass. We could not navigate anymore. Yeah. The first manifestation of this was the nuclear bomb. Yeah. Nuclear weapons were the first manifestations of it, where morality no longer dictated, ethics no longer dictated. And so the decline of philosophy and we should try very hard to resurrect philosophy as a guiding principle, an organizing principle.
Karl Popper told not only to scientists what to do or what to think to, but also to politicians. Yes. Because his political works are very important.
Philosophers set the guidelines. They set the guidelines in politics, the guidelines in science, they set guidelines. That was the job. The job was to set guidelines. Yeah. They could use ethical systems, they could use rational systems, systems of reasoning, logic, formal languages, but whatever instrument they happen to use, the idea was to guide. And when we discarded these guides, we lost our way. We went astray. In everything. In absolutely everything.
So, thank you very much.
Thank you.
I think that we can talk for hours.
Yes,
because there are many issues. But this interview will have to end somehow.
Yes, thank you.